day. In the previous episode, I told us about essentially the concept of the American petrodollar, how the agreement came about, and how particularly it was essentially launched from Saudi Arabian oil, crude oil reserves. Again, don't forget. Let me remind you also that before the petrodollar, gold used to be the global reserve currency. Essentially, for countries and individuals, you were only as rich as how much gold you had. Largely, gold was the major global reserve currency. But since that 1974 agreement, the gold standard was dropped and the American petrodollar standard was essentially as adopted, and America became the global reserve currency. Now, how did America get other countries to come on board the petrodollar scheme? A classic example is Iraq. Remember the Iraq War, the Gulf Wars, how Saddam Hussein was eventually killed and all. Right. After Saddam Hussein was eventually taken out, America eventually succeeded in installing its allies as the political leaders of Iraq. However, there was a deal that was done. The deal was not necessarily publicized, but that is what obtains our success in Iraq up till now. America essentially, you know, grabbed, locked up, and seized the economic lifeline of Iraq. And what is the economic lifeline of Iraq? It is crude oil. You see, in the world, Venezuela has the largest global crude oil reserves, slightly above 300 billion barrels. After that, you have if I remember very well, after that is Saudi Arabia, slightly around 267 billion, barrels. After that, you have Iran. Iran is number three, around 200 plus billion reserves. I think after that is Iraq. So that makes Iraq a very important country when it comes to the global crude oil ecosystem. What did America simply do? America captured and seized their oil because it is essentially 97% of their revenue. How did America do it? They built a system, and that system is that for every barrel or liter of crude oil that Iraq sells, the payment for that batch of crude oil is not made to Iraqi central bank. It is made to the Federal Reserve Bank in New York, to the American central bank, essentially. So when Iraq sells oil, it is America that collects the money, and America can do as it so wishes with the money. The oil is Iraq's, but the revenue for the oil, Iraq cannot eat its oil, it cannot drink its oil, it cannot convert its oil to infrastructure, it cannot use crude oil to pay its staff, its government employees, it cannot use crude oil to run the budget. It must use money, and that money has to be petrodollars. Don't forget, the money is paid to the US. Now, what the US now does is that every month, the Iraqi government essentially submits its budget to the US. And the US now decides how much it wants to give Iraq of the money Iraq asks for. Essentially, there is no financial sovereignty for the Iraqi government. In fact, every month, the Iraqi, whatever America wants to give Iraq of its money, is flown into Iraq cash with cargo planes. And when the money arrives, all Iraq can essentially do is to start doling the money out cash. And that is why. So some of the implications of that is that number one, Iraq is a very weak country in terms of its economy and its physical structure, as in fiscal structure. Number two, it means that Iraq is essentially not able to power major infrastructure projects because whatever America releases of its money is released to it in essentially non-functional, useless bits and pieces. Number three, it meant that in Iraq, corruption is very rife. Because when the cash lands in those planes, all the Iraqi government can do is to essentially start doling it out to all sorts of chieftains, all sorts of warlords, all sorts of leaders of Bantustans and things like that. In Yoruba, they will say that wọ́n ti sọ owó yẹn di yẹ́lẹyẹ̀lẹ, wọ́n ti pín owó yẹn yẹ́lẹyẹ̀lẹ mọ́ wọn lọ́wọ́. So essentially, Iraq is not an economically sovereign or an economically free country. It cannot sell its goods and collect the money for its goods and spend the money on itself. The crude belongs to Iraq. The money functionally belongs to America. And America chooses to give Iraq whatever it wants to give it on a monthly basis. This is what I want for this month, sir. I can only give you 10%. I can only give you 50%. I'm happy with you this month. I'll give you 90%. In fact, I'm pissed at you. I'm not giving you anything. And there is absolutely nothing the Iraqi government can do. Because of that, also, Iraq does not have effective political sovereignty. Let me give you an example of that fact. Very recently, Iraq did its parliamentary elections, and a particular man named Nouri al Maliki, note his name very well, Nouri al Maliki was on the verge of being elected as the prime minister of Iraq. The Americans said, if you elect Nouri al-Maliki as Prime Minister of Iraq, we are going to deal with you. You know what that dealing essentially means. If you elect Nouri al-Maliki as the Prime Minister, it means that we are going to essentially seize your budget for the next month and the next month and the next month, probably until the next year. We would defund your country so much that Nouri al-Maliki will not even be able to function as Prime Minister. So what is the point? Nouri al-Maliki has eventually, only recently, surrendered his bid to become prime minister simply because the economic and eventually the political sovereignty of Iraq is actually not domiciled in the Iraqi central bank. It is domiciled in the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, which is the de facto central bank of America. That is one of the implications of the petrodollar scheme. In the case of Iraq, that is how the United States of America has been able to browbeat and force Iraq essentially into the petrodollar scheme. So it is Iraq that owns the oil, but it is America that gets rich and chooses to spend to Iraq, chooses to give to Iraq whatever it so wishes. In the next video, we are going to be speaking about the Venezuela story, which is even worse actually than the Iraqi story. Thank you for joining us yet again on this episode. Don't forget to like, to share, to follow, to comment, and please ask your questions like I always say. I will gladly answer them. Thank you very much. See you in the next episode.